Princess Zilora stood tall and graceful, her long, flowing hair shimmering in the light of the spaceship's docking bay. The distant stars outside the large window gave a calming glow, reflecting her serene expression. As the Vrenla princess, she had always been in control of her emotions, maintaining an unshakable calm that was expected from someone of her royal status. Yet today, something felt different. The Earth, a young planet in the vastness of the galaxy, seemed to pulse with energy, its chaotic history both a mystery and a challenge. Her mission here was simple, or so she thought. She was to observe the human race and determine whether they were a threat to galactic peace. The Vrenla had always been cautious of the humans' unpredictable nature, and Zilora's role was to decide if this fragile alliance could truly survive. Her arrival on Earth was met with the usual respect and ceremony. The humans had prepared a grand welcome, with representatives from their government greeting her at the dock. They spoke of cooperation and peace, offering Zilora the finest accommodations and every luxury their world had to offer. But Zilora's mind wasn't on the amenities. She was more focused on the task at hand. The last thing she wanted was to be distracted by their gestures. After all, she had no interest in developing a close bond with the people of this planet. Her duty was to ensure the peace between their two species. Among the humans, there was one who stood out more than the others, Captain Elias. He was part of the military team assigned to escort her during her stay. The humans, unlike the Vrenla, valued their soldiers greatly, and Captain Elias was one of their best. He was tall, with sharp features and a commanding presence. His eyes, a deep brown, seemed to reflect both intelligence and strength. He was unfazed by the presence of the royal princess, treating her with the same respect he would offer to any soldier or officer. Zilora couldn't help but observe him as he spoke with the others. There was something about him that seemed different from the others. While the rest of the humans were eager to please her with their displays of wealth and culture, Elias remained composed, focused solely on his duties. It was this unspoken confidence that caught her attention. For the first time in a long while, Zilora felt something stir inside her, a feeling that she quickly pushed aside, refusing to acknowledge. As the days passed, Zilora remained focused on her mission. She visited human cities, learning about their technology, culture, and history. Yet her thoughts often wandered back to Captain Elias. She could feel his eyes on her, watching her movements with a quiet intensity. It was unsettling. No one had ever made her feel this way before. Her interactions with the other humans had been polite, respectful, but distant. With Elias, however, there was an undeniable pull. It was as if his presence alone was enough to make her question her composed nature. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Zilora found herself alone in her quarters, staring out at the stars. The room was quiet, peaceful, the perfect environment for reflection. Yet, as she tried to center herself, she couldn't stop thinking about Elias. She had never been one to allow personal distractions to interfere with her duties, but for some reason, she found herself completely captivated by him. Suddenly, there was a knock on her door. Zilora's heart skipped a beat. It was late, and she hadn't expected anyone to visit her at this hour. She rose from the window and approached the door. It opened to reveal Captain Elias standing in the hallway, his posture as rigid as ever. "Your Highness," he greeted, his voice calm and respectful, but there was something in his gaze that Zilora couldn't quite place. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Zilora's breath caught in her throat, her usual composure slipping for just a moment. She quickly regained her calm, masking any sign of surprise. "Not at all, Captain. What brings you here at this hour?" Elias hesitated for a brief moment before speaking again. "I wanted to check in on you, Your Highness. I understand that this mission may be overwhelming at times. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask." Zilora studied him for a moment, her gaze searching his face. She had always been able to read people easily, to understand their motives and intentions. But with Elias, it was different. His face was unreadable, his intentions unclear. She felt a sudden wave of vulnerability that she wasn't accustomed to. She wasn't sure if it was his genuine concern or something else entirely, but it stirred something deep within her. "I appreciate your concern, Captain," Zilora replied, trying to steady her emotions. "But I am fine. I have faced far greater challenges in my life than this mission." Elias nodded, his eyes still fixed on her. There was something almost protective in his expression, something that made Zilora's heart race. She quickly turned away, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. How odd. She, the Vrenla princess, flustered by a human soldier. It was unthinkable, yet here she was, struggling to maintain her composure in the face of a simple conversation. "I'll leave you to your rest, your highness," Elias said, his tone still respectful but now with a hint of something else, something softer. "Good night." "Good night, Captain," Zilora replied, her voice steady but her mind in turmoil. As Elias left, closing the door behind him, Zilora leaned against it, her hand resting on the cool surface. What was happening to her? She had always been in control, always maintained her royal composure. Yet here she was, flustered by a human soldier. A soldier who had shown her nothing but courtesy, and yet had unknowingly stirred something deep within her. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside her. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The mission had started as a simple observation, but now everything seemed more complicated. It wasn't just about peace anymore. It was about something far more personal, something she wasn't sure she was ready to confront. As the night deepened, Zilora's thoughts remained with Elias. She couldn't deny the growing sense of unease she felt every time they crossed paths. She was no longer just a princess on a diplomatic mission. She was a woman, caught in the web of emotions she had long avoided. Tomorrow she would see Elias again, and she wasn't sure how she would face him. The calm princess who had never wavered in the face of any challenge was now uncertain. And that, more than anything, troubled her. The next morning, Zilora woke early, as was her habit. Her room was peaceful, the soft hum of the spaceship systems in the background, but her mind was anything but calm. It had been a restless night, full of thoughts of Captain Elias and the unsettling emotions he had stirred in her. She had tried to meditate before bed, but her usual methods of finding peace seemed to fall short. The memory of his soft, almost protective gaze lingered in her mind. It was a feeling she couldn't escape, and it made her question everything she had ever known about herself. She rose from the bed, dressed in her royal uniform, and walked over to the window. The stars outside the spaceship's large viewports stretched endlessly into the dark void of space, a sight she had seen countless times before. But today, the view felt different. There was a weight to it, a heaviness that hadn't been there before. It was as though the stars themselves were watching her, waiting for her to make a decision. Her role as an observer was clear. She was here to study Earth, to understand its people and determine if humanity posed a threat to the peace of the galaxy. But now, something had shifted. Her mission was no longer just about observation. It had become personal. She didn't know what it was about Elias that made her feel this way, but it was undeniable. There was something about him that unsettled her, something that drew her in despite her best efforts to remain detached. Zilora shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. She had a mission to complete, and she couldn't afford to let her emotions get in the way. She had faced far greater challenges before, diplomatic negotiations with the Krelthar, navigating the politics of the Vrenla Council, even leading her people through moments of crisis. But this was different. Elias was different. As she prepared for the day, Zilora was determined to push aside the distractions and focus on the task at hand. She couldn't afford to be distracted by a human soldier, no matter how charming or enigmatic he seemed. She had a duty to her people, and she would not let her personal feelings interfere with that. Later that morning, Zilora attended a meeting with the Earth's leaders. The discussions were formal and, as expected, focused on the continued peace between their two species. The humans spoke of their advances in technology, their hopes for future collaboration, and the need for mutual respect. Zilora listened attentively, her eyes scanning the room, noting the faces of the human representatives. She had always been a keen observer, able to read people with ease, and today she noticed something new, a tension in the air. It was subtle, but Zilora could feel it. The humans were nervous, perhaps uncertain about the future. She could see it in their eyes, hear it in their voices, and it unsettled her. Why were they nervous? Had they not done enough to secure the peace? Were they truly ready for this alliance? Her thoughts were interrupted when Elias entered the room, his military uniform sharp and crisp, his posture straight and commanding. He moved to stand beside her, his presence as calm and steady as ever. Despite the tension in the room, Elias seemed completely at ease. It was a quality Zilora admired. She envied it, in fact. It was something she had always prided herself on, her own ability to remain composed in any situation. But today, something was different. Today, Elias' presence made her feel unsure. He gave her a brief, respectful nod, then turned his attention to the proceedings. Zilora couldn't help but notice the way the other humans seemed to respond to him. There was a quiet admiration in their eyes, a respect that spoke volumes about his leadership and character. And yet Zilora couldn't help but feel a strange sense of competition. She had always been the one in control, the one people looked to for guidance. But Elias had a power of his own, one that didn't require titles or status. As the meeting continued, Zilora tried to focus on the discussion, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Elias. She couldn't understand why he affected her this way. She had met many people throughout her life, many strong, capable individuals. But none of them had ever made her feel so, flustered. She was a princess, a leader among her people, yet Elias made her feel like a novice in matters of the heart. After the meeting, Elias approached her once more, his expression as unreadable as always. "Your Highness," he said, his voice low and respectful, "I wanted to speak with you about tomorrow's mission. We've finalized the details, and I'll be accompanying you to the human military base to oversee the technology you'll be inspecting." Zilora nodded, her thoughts momentarily pulled back to the task at hand. "Of course, Captain. I look forward to seeing what Earth has to offer in terms of military advancements." Elias hesitated for a moment, then added, "I know this mission is important to you, Your Highness. But I want you to know that you can trust me. I'll be with you every step of the way." His words were sincere, and Zilora could hear the quiet determination in his voice. It was something she had always admired in others, a sense of loyalty, of duty, but hearing it from Elias, it made her heart skip a beat. She had always been the one in charge, the one who people looked to for leadership. But Elias, with his simple, unwavering presence, made her question her own authority. "Thank you, Captain," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I do trust you." For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Zilora felt her heart race. She quickly looked away, focusing on the mission at hand. She couldn't afford to let these feelings take root. There was too much at stake. As the day wore on, Zilora found herself growing increasingly restless. The quiet moments with Elias were becoming more frequent, and each time she felt the same flutter of uncertainty. She couldn't understand why he made her feel this way, but she couldn't ignore it any longer. Her usual sense of control, the calm that had always been her trademark, was slipping away. She was no longer just a princess on a diplomatic mission. She was a woman caught in a whirlwind of emotions she didn't know how to handle. That evening, Zilora walked alone through the corridors of the ship. She needed space to think, to clear her mind. The quiet of the hallway was soothing, the soft hum of the ship's systems a familiar comfort. But even in the solitude, her thoughts remained focused on Elias. She couldn't escape the pull he had on her, and it frustrated her. She stopped in front of a window, gazing out at the vast expanse of space. The stars were distant, cold, and far beyond reach. In a way, they mirrored how she felt, distant from the world around her, unreachable, and yet somehow connected to everything. "Your Highness," Elias' voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to find him standing behind her, his expression unreadable as always. "Captain," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. "What is it?" "I didn't mean to interrupt your thoughts," Elias said. "But I thought I'd check in. I wanted to ensure that you're comfortable with tomorrow's plan. I know this mission is important, and I want to make sure you're prepared." Zilora nodded, appreciating his concern. "I am. I've been preparing for this my entire life." "I will be ready." Elias smiled slightly, and for a moment Zilora caught a glimpse of something different in his eyes, something softer. It was a brief look, but it made her heart skip a beat. She quickly turned away, unwilling to acknowledge the feelings rising inside her. "I'll be ready, Captain," she repeated, trying to steady her voice. "Thank you for your support." With a nod, Elias turned and left, leaving Zilora standing by the window, her mind swirling with thoughts of him. She didn't know what it was about Elias that had such a powerful effect on her, but she couldn't ignore it any longer. The calm she had once relied on was fading, and in its place, something new was taking root, something she wasn't sure she was ready for. As she gazed out at the stars once more, Zilora realized that her mission on Earth was no longer just about observing humanity. It had become something much more complicated, something she would have to navigate carefully, and with a heart she wasn't sure she fully understood. Tomorrow she would face Elias again, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to face the feelings he had awakened in her. The day had come. Zilora stood in front of the large observation window, watching as the Earth's vast landscape unfolded below. The planet's surface, a blend of green, blue, and white, was mesmerizing. She had seen countless worlds in her time, but there was something about Earth that felt different, raw, untamed, yet full of promise. She had traveled across the galaxy to observe this planet, to determine whether humanity was ready to join the peaceful alliance the Vrenla had forged. But as her mission unfolded, she found herself facing something unexpected. It was no longer just about the peace of the galaxy. It was about her and the emotions she had started to feel in the presence of one human soldier, Captain Elias. Zilora's thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of the doorbell. She turned and saw Elias standing in the doorway, his military uniform sharp and neat, his expression as stoic as ever. But she could see the subtle change in him as well. There was a tension in his posture, a hesitance in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Your Highness," Elias said with a bow of his head, "the transport to the military base is ready. Are you prepared?" Zilora nodded, pulling herself together. She couldn't let her personal feelings interfere with the task at hand. Her mission was still to observe and assess the humans. She had to remain detached, focused. Yet, as she walked toward the door, Elias' presence lingered at the back of her mind. He was impossible to ignore. As they boarded the transport, Zilora tried to focus on the mission, but Elias' steady presence beside her made that difficult. The journey was quiet, and despite the sleek, modern design of the spacecraft, Zilora couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. She couldn't pinpoint it. Perhaps it was the way Elias had looked at her earlier, or the way her heart raced whenever he was near. The base they were heading to was an impressive structure, vast and filled with technology far beyond what the Vrenla had expected from humans. As they arrived, Zilora was immediately struck by the scale of it all. Humans, despite their chaotic history, had achieved incredible feats. There was a raw energy to them that she had never anticipated. She had studied their technologies, their advancements, but seeing it all in person was different. Elias led the way as they entered the base, his steps confident and steady. Zilora followed, keeping her royal composure in place, but her mind kept drifting back to Elias. She couldn't deny it anymore. He had become a distraction. Every step he took, every word he spoke, seemed to reverberate through her thoughts. It wasn't just his strength or his presence, it was something deeper. They passed through the corridors, their footsteps echoing in the cold, sterile hallways. Zilora observed everything, her sharp mind taking in the details, the advanced weaponry, the human soldiers working with a sense of purpose, the complex machinery humming around them. But even as she studied the humans' capabilities, she couldn't help but notice the way Elias moved through it all. He was calm, in control, and yet there was something about him that drew her in. As they reached the central command room, Elias turned to Zilora. "This is where we'll be able to observe the latest military technology," he said, his voice steady and clear. "It's impressive even by Vrenla standards, but I trust you'll be able to make a fair assessment." Zilora gave a small nod, her eyes scanning the room. "I'm sure I will," she replied, though her mind wasn't fully on the technology. It was on Elias, on the strange emotions that had been stirring inside her. She had always been a leader, always the one in control. But with him, she felt a vulnerability she had never experienced before. The meeting began, and humans in various uniforms moved about the room, presenting their technological advancements. Zilora listened carefully, taking in the information. But her thoughts were still clouded by Elias. Every time he spoke, his words seemed to carry an unspoken meaning, a subtle connection that left her feeling uneasy. She couldn't ignore the way he looked at her, the way he seemed to understand her without words. As the presentation concluded, Zilora found herself more unsettled than ever. The humans had proven their technological prowess, but she couldn't focus on that. Her mind was consumed by Elias. It wasn't just his loyalty, his strength, or his military skill. It was something deeper, something she couldn't quite name. Elias noticed the change in her. He had known Zilora for a few days now, and he had never seen her so distracted, so vulnerable. She had always been composed, regal, the picture of unshakable strength. But now there was something different about her, something he couldn't ignore. He had seen her react to his presence, seen the way her eyes would linger on him before she quickly turned away. It was subtle, but he had noticed. After the presentation, they took a short break. Zilora stepped outside to get some fresh air, her mind racing. The military base was vast and sterile, the air filled with the hum of technology. She needed space, needed to think, but her thoughts always returned to Elia's. She found herself standing alone on a balcony, gazing out at the sprawling base below. "You're quiet today, Your Highness," Elia's voice broke through her thoughts. Zilora turned to see him standing behind her, his expression neutral but his eyes searching. "I'm just thinking," she said softly, not wanting to admit the truth. The truth that she was struggling with feelings she had never expected. Elia stepped closer, his presence like a weight she couldn't escape. "About the mission?" he asked, his voice still steady but with an edge of concern. "Or something else?" Zilora hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "It's nothing," she said, though the words felt hollow. She couldn't lie to him, not now, not when he seemed to see through her so easily. "It's just, this mission, I didn't expect it to be so complicated." Elias nodded, understanding more than she expected. "I get it," he said quietly. "You've always been in control, haven't you? But sometimes even the strongest leaders need to let go a little. It doesn't make you weak, Zilora. It makes you human." His words struck a chord deep within her. Human. She had never thought of herself as human, never thought she needed to embrace emotions the way they did. The Vrenla had always prided themselves on their logical, controlled nature. But Elias had made her question everything she had ever known about herself. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in days. His gaze was steady, sincere, and for a moment she felt like he was seeing her for who she truly was. Not as a princess or a diplomat, but as someone who had her own fears, her own struggles. She wasn't just a leader. She was a person, someone who was capable of feeling, of caring. "I don't know what's happening to me," Zilora said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never felt like this before." Elias took a step closer, his expression softening. "It's okay," he said gently. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." Zilora's heart raced, the words hitting her with a force she hadn't expected. Together. She had always been alone, always relied on her own strength to navigate the galaxy. But now Elias was offering her something she had never considered. He was offering her support, offering to stand by her side. And for the first time, she didn't feel so alone. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Zilora said, her voice shaky. "But I don't want to push you away either." Elias reached out, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You don't have to be ready, Zilora. We'll take it one step at a time. You don't have to do it alone." The weight of his words sank in, and for the first time since arriving on Earth, Zilora felt a sense of peace. She wasn't alone. She had Elias, and perhaps that was all she needed. As they stood there together, the vastness of the base spread out before them, and for a brief moment, everything else seemed to fade away. There were no missions, no alliances, no responsibilities. Just Zilora and Elias, standing side by side, facing whatever came next, together. The peace didn't last long, as the alarms soon blared throughout the base, signaling a breach in the security system. But for that one moment, Zilora had a sense of clarity, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. She wasn't just the calm princess anymore. She was something more. She was a person, ready to embrace the unknown with the one person who had made her feel that way, Elias. As the alarms rang, Zilora turned to Elias, her determination returning. "We have work to do," she said, her voice steady again. Elias nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Let's get to it." And with that, they stepped into the unknown together. The day had begun like any other, with the hum of the military base and the quiet bustle of its operations filling the air. But Zilora knew this day would be different. The alarms that had sounded earlier were not a drill. Something had gone wrong, and now she and Elias were at the center of it all. The air felt heavy with tension as they hurried through the corridors of the base. Zilora's heart raced, but she kept her composure, focusing on the task ahead. She had dealt with crises before, diplomatic breakdowns, natural disasters, even sabotage within her own ranks. But this was different. This wasn't a political problem or a simple misunderstanding. This was something more dangerous, and it had put both her mission and her growing feelings for Elias in jeopardy. Elias walked beside her, his expression as calm as ever, but Zilora could see the glint of concern in his eyes. He had been by her side through everything, providing protection, guidance, and a steady presence. She knew she could trust him, just as she had come to trust the strange emotions he had stirred in her. As they entered the command center, the scene before them was chaotic. Military personnel scrambled to manage the situation, communicating over loudspeakers, trying to assess the severity of the breach. Zilora's sharp eyes took in every detail, her mind quickly processing the information. "Status report," Elias barked, his voice firm as he moved to a nearby officer. His authority was unquestionable, and the soldier quickly handed him a report. Zilora stood back, allowing Elias to handle the situation. She admired the way he took charge, the ease with which he commanded respect. She had never expected this. When she first arrived on Earth, she had been wary of the humans. Their emotions were so raw, so unpredictable compared to the logical, controlled nature of her own people. But Elias, he was different. He had a quiet strength that seemed to emanate from within him, and it drew her in. He wasn't just a soldier to her. He had become something much more, someone she didn't want to lose. "Your Highness," Elias said, turning to her after a moment. "We've located the breach. It's inside the lower levels of the base. We need to go now." Zilora nodded, feeling the weight of the situation settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just about peace anymore. It wasn't about assessing the humans' readiness for an alliance. It was about survival, and it was about trust. Elias led the way, his steps quick and purposeful. Zilora followed closely behind, her mind racing with questions. Who had breached the base? What were their intentions? And most importantly, could they stop it before it was too late? As they reached the elevator that would take them down to the lower levels, Elias turned to her, his face more serious than she had ever seen it. "Stay close to me, Your Highness. We don't know what's down there." Zilora didn't hesitate. "I trust you, Captain." The elevator descended with a soft hum, and the tension in the air seemed to thicken. Zilora could feel her heart beating in her chest, and she wondered if Elias could hear it too. He had been her protector since she arrived, but she was no longer just a princess to him. She could feel it in the way he looked at her, in the small, almost imperceptible touches that had become more frequent in the past few days. The doors opened with a soft chime, and they stepped into the dimly lit hallway. The atmosphere down here was different, cold, industrial, and silent. It felt wrong, as though the very walls were holding their breath. Zilora's senses were heightened, her body ready for whatever was to come. Elias held up his hand, signaling for her to stop. He turned to her, his expression hard but caring. "Wait here," he ordered. "I'll go ahead and assess the situation. Stay out of sight." Zilora shook her head, her voice firm. "No, Elias, I'm coming with you." He hesitated for a moment, clearly torn. "This isn't like the rest of the mission. We don't know what's down there. It's too dangerous." Zilora stepped closer to him, her eyes locked on his. "I've faced danger before. I'm not afraid of it." He studied her for a long moment, then finally nodded. "Fine. Stay close and keep your head down." They moved deeper into the base, their footsteps echoing in the narrow corridor. Zilora could feel the tension in Elias' body as he led the way, his movements smooth and practiced. She tried to focus on the mission, on the danger that lurked ahead, but her mind kept returning to him. She had never felt this way before, and it was both exhilarating and terrifying. As they reached the main control room of the lower level, Elias held up his hand again, signaling for silence. They both crouched behind a row of crates, peering around the corner. Through the small window in the control room door, they could see figures moving in the shadows. Zilora's sharp eyes narrowed as she studied them. They were humans, but their movements were erratic, unnatural. They were wearing the same military uniforms as the others, but there was something different about them, something dangerous. "Are they rebels?" Zilora whispered, her voice barely audible. Elias' jaw tightened. "No, they're not. These aren't our people." Without another word, he turned and motioned for her to follow him. They moved quickly and quietly, their steps light and calculated. Zilora could feel the adrenaline building in her veins as they approached the control room. Every instinct told her they were walking into a trap, but she couldn't back down now. She couldn't let Elias face this alone. As they reached the door, Elias turned to her once more, his eyes intense. "Stay behind me. Do not engage unless I tell you." Zilora nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never been more aware of the danger surrounding them, but for the first time she wasn't afraid. She trusted Elias, and that trust, that connection, gave her the strength to move forward. Elias kicked the door open with a swift motion, and they burst into the room, weapons drawn and ready. The figures inside froze, their eyes wide with surprise. Zilora's breath caught in her throat as she recognized them. They weren't just rebels. They were agents of a much larger conspiracy, one that threatened not only Earth but the peace of the entire galaxy. The leader of the group, A tall man with dark eyes and a cold expression stepped forward. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low and threatening. "This base belongs to us now." Elias' eyes narrowed as he raised his weapon. "This base belongs to Earth, and we won't let you take it." A tense silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of distant alarms. Zilora's pulse raced as she watched the standoff unfold. She had been trained for moments like this, but nothing could have prepared her for the weight of the situation. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She was a part of this, standing alongside Elias, facing a threat that could destroy everything they had worked for. The leader smirked, his fingers twitching as he reached for a weapon of his own. But before he could make a move, Elias was on him, disarming him in a flash of motion that left Zilora in awe. "Get down!" Elias shouted as he turned to Zilora, pushing her behind him. The group of rebels fired, but Elias moved with the precision of a trained soldier, dodging the shots and returning fire with calculated accuracy. Zilora watched, her heart pounding, as Elias fought with the skill and determination she had come to expect from him. He was a protector, a fighter, and someone she could depend on. As the firefight continued, Zilora's mind raced. She couldn't just stand by and watch. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't a bystander. She had a duty to her people, to the humans who had entrusted her with their future. And she wouldn't let Elias face this alone. With a deep breath, she moved out from behind the cover, drawing her own weapon and taking aim. She fired, hitting one of the rebels in the shoulder, forcing him to fall back. Elias glanced over at her, a brief look of surprise in his eyes, but then he nodded, acknowledging her. Together, they moved through the room, clearing the remaining rebels one by one. Zilora fought with a focus and determination she hadn't known she was capable of, her trust in Elias giving her strength. They were a team, and together they could overcome anything. When the last of the rebels was subdued, the room fell silent once more. Zilora stood, her breath heavy but her heart calm. Elias turned to her, his expression softening for the first time since the mission began. "You did well, Your Highness," he said, his voice low but filled with respect. Zilora met his gaze, her heart swelling with emotions she couldn't name. "I couldn't have done it without you, Elias," he smiled, a genuine smile that warmed her more than she had expected. "We make a good team, Zilora." In that moment, as they stood together in the aftermath of the battle, Zilora realized something she hadn't fully understood until now. The mission wasn't just about observing humanity. It wasn't just about peace or alliances. It was about her and Elias and the connection they had forged together. They had faced danger together, fought side by side, and emerged victorious. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, Zilora knew one thing for certain: she was no longer alone. Elias was by her side, and together they would face whatever came next.